7:01. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order. I guess the first item is the approval of the agenda for May the 4th, 2022. Recommendation is okay. Seconded by Ralph. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Okay, adoption of the minutes for the meeting April 6th, 2022. Recommendation the minutes for that April 6th meeting be approved. And have that moved.
Move adoption.
Okay, Ralph seconded.
I'll second it.
All approved then? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moving on to item 4. It's my privilege to welcome Dennis back, the acting CAO for Belcarra. And I'd invite him to say a few words.
Thank you, Ian. Well, it will be a few words because I don't really have much to offer at this point, other than to say that, as I think you all know, Lauren is just off on a medical leave, and we have such a small staff that one person being away for any length of time leaves quite a hole in the administration. So they asked me if I was interested and available to come in and give them a hand, and I'm glad to be able to do so. So I started on March 29th, and so this is actually my first OCP review committee, and I have met some of you, some I've known for a much longer time, Ralph Drew in particular, and others I haven't met. But anyway, I'm very pleased to be in Belcarra, and I'm pleased to be part of this meeting tonight, and look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much then, Dennis. Okay, I guess I will turn the meeting over to Urban Systems. Is Melissa taking it, or who wants to catch it?
Yeah, you get to listen to me. So Andrew's just going to pull up the presentation and we'll get started.
We need to enable sharing.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay.
All right, thank you, Andrew. So this is our 4th meeting. We've come a long way in the last few months. So tonight, what we're going to do is we want to give you a bit of an, well, actually, my first is a request. So if you'll recall, when we first started, we put a call out for photos from OCP review committee members, photos of the community that we could use in the new OCP document. So we did receive a couple, one shown on the screen here. We don't have too many. So if there are any photos that you have of the community that you'd like featured in the OCP, certainly feel free to forward them on to Paula, and she'll make sure that we get them and we can include them in the plan. Tonight, we're going to just give you an update on where we are with our stakeholder engagement. And then we want to present to you the draft vision and strategic goals that we crafted based on feedback that we received from yourself and also from our public engagement activities. We're going to give you an overview of what we have in mind for phase 2 engagement. And then, as we have done in our meeting last month, we'll take the bulk of the time to go through your research team presentations. And at the end, we'll talk about what our next steps are. So we're making some progress on our timeline. We are now in phase 3, which we refer to as plan development. And this is the point where our team is busy working behind the scenes to actually start drafting the new OCP document. We intend to have a full draft of the plan ready to share with you at the beginning of June. So the next time we meet, we will walk you through the plan on screen, and then you'll have some time to take it away and review it on your own. So lots happening in the next couple of weeks. So in terms of our stakeholder engagement, we have touched base with all of the major stakeholders, with the exception of Tsleil-Waututh Nation. But having said that, we are making some progress. So if you recall, in February, a letter was sent government to government to Chief Thomas. And we've been following up with correspondence throughout March and trying to get a meeting set up with them. And Dennis, thankfully, has been able to make some progress on that front on our behalf. And Andrew and I have actually made contact, and we've scheduled the first meeting. So we'll be moving forward with that engagement. And, you know, I don't think I have to tell you how important it is that we connect with Tsleil-Waututh before we make a recommendation to bring the OCP before council. So we're really quite happy to have sort of opened the door and started this conversation. You know, what are our goals for the conversations we're going to have with them? Well, one, to advance truth and reconciliation in the Belcarra community. We really want to include Tsleil-Waututh's voice in the plan. It's something that we talked about very early on in the planning process, how their voice is absent in the existing OCP. So we want to get their perspective on what the community's past, present, and future will be. And we also want to, through the maps in the plan, identify any places that may be of cultural or historical significance in the community. So this is one of the topics of conversation that we'll be having when we meet with them in the coming weeks. So good news on that front. Just wanted to touch base on the ELC lands and let you know that Andrew and I have received a copy of the proposed plans on the property. We've had a look at them. I know a number of you, just based on the correspondence that we saw, had some questions about how the new OCP will address the ELC lands. So what we understand is that they're exploring a couple of different options. They have a detailed site plan that's been prepared. They're proposing to rezone the entire property for commercial purposes. We know that the ELC has met with Dennis, and their proposal has been presented to administration. So there are a couple of things. You know, the ELC lands do not have road access at this point. And our understanding is that while they've undertaken a number of feasibility studies to see whether or not a road can be constructed, Metro Vancouver hasn't endorsed the construction of the road or indicated support for it as of yet. So the way we look at it is that, you know, this is a separate planning process that is going to move forward. And we don't feel that there's any rush that we need to push that planning process forward to line up with our timelines here. I think the scope of what is being proposed is quite significant, and it deserves its own public consultation process on its own. The existing policy framework in the OCP right now does not align with what the plans are that we have seen. there is an opportunity for us through our OCP process to amend those policies to set up a framework for what would happen if the ELC were to bring forward an application. So we can address it in the plan, but we feel that just to move forward with designating those lands commercial, particularly given the intensity of the use that they're proposing, would be inappropriate, and that application deserves quite a bit more consideration and its own public consultation process. So we will be meeting with their representatives and continuing to have some conversations. I guess that's probably the update we have for you. Are there any questions or comments on that before we move forward?
Melissa, I would just make the comment that I think you may have said that their interest is to rezone the entire site to commercial, and I'm just looking at a written submission that they have, and they're actually wanting to narrow that down to something a little bit more specific. They're looking at 15 acres of the 75 to 80 acre site, so it wouldn't be the entire site. That's not, at least, I mean, they haven't put forward a rezoning application as such, but in the written materials that I have from them, it does indicate a part of the site. So it's small point, but I wanted to make that clear.
I think the other thing that's worth noting too at this point is that the existing OCP doesn't have a commercial land use designation right now. And so we would be introducing one. Through the public engagement process, we did hear from a number of members of the community that there is some interest in having a commercial designation, but certainly what is envisioned under that designation is significantly smaller than what is being proposed on the ELC lands. What we heard from the community is that if there were to be commercial uses in the village, that they would be along the lines of, like, you know, a coffee shop or a very small specialized grocery store, things like that, not necessarily something that would be as intense as what's being proposed right now.
Wonder if I could ask a question. If we're talking commercial, then there's going to be an issue with the road through the park to Fair Cove, because I believe the park does not allow their roads to be used for commercial access. So now that means one of two things for this development. Either it's going to have to get its own road in, which means we've got the same ongoing problem of putting the park area that it has to go through actually belongs to Port Moody. So there's that issue that has not been resolved in the last two OCPs. The other issue is that I think the land is currently water access only. And they do have a very large dock on the site. And my question would be whether or not they would be accessing the development by water during the time that there's going to be considerable time before we get a road through there because of the consultation with Port Moody, the parks, and them. So, and the Fair Cove people. So that's going to be a long-term exercise, I would think.
Ralph, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Melissa. A small technical clarification. The land itself between Belcarra and the Fair Cove group of properties is, for all intents, owned and administered by Metro Vancouver. It happens to be also within the municipal boundaries of Port Moody. So it's not owned by Port Moody, but Port Moody has some jurisdictional oversight. But my interpretation is if it's your land, owned and administered, that Metro Vancouver is the key player on this subject. Thank you.
And so Andrew, maybe you might want to speak a little bit about your meeting that you had with Metro Vancouver Parks.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, thank you for that, Ralph. So absolutely, Metro Vancouver is a key player in this, not only as like the regional body, but as per their parks function, because a lot of the area is regional park as well. And parks from you know, their mandate of like conservation and environmental protection is not interested in a road at this time, is the message that we got. So any conversations about road are beyond that with the village and are something that the applicant needs to take up with Metro Vancouver.
Hmm.
I mean, they also floated, pun not intended, the idea of water access, which is another question, but that brings back to Melissa's point about the existing policy framework and what we're hearing from the community. So that would require its own process, and so there's the road. There's the policy framework. There's a few issues that are beyond the scope of the OCP that need to be sorted out.
Are there any other questions or comments on this topic before we move on? Okay then. Okay, so are you ready? The grand unveiling of the draft vision and strategic goals. So these, again, as I mentioned, were crafted based on input that we received from yourselves, as well as input we received from the community survey in the first community open house that we had. So we took all of that feedback together and looked for common themes and common ideas of how the community would like to see Belcarra grow and develop over the next 20 years. So the working draft vision is Belcarra is a peaceful village between the forest and the sea. In 2040, Belcarra will be a safe, sustainable, and welcoming community surrounded by natural beauty. So we are open to feedback, comments about this draft vision statement. I know we wanted to keep it very short, very crisp. We wanted to tie it to a particular time frame, recognizing that the OCP will have a 20-year time horizon roughly. We heard a lot from the community about safety, sustainability, wanting to be welcoming, not only for residents that live in the community, but also towards visitors that come and enjoy the natural areas around Belcarra as well. So if you have any suggestions or comments, happy to hear them. So our
Maybe.
intent is that we will present this at the next public open house as well and get more community feedback on it.
I just want to make a comment. I like it. I think it's really succinct, and I think it bodes really well with our community. I don't know how other people feel, but I like it. That's my comment.
Thank you, Sandra. Marianne, I see your hand is up.
I agree with Sandra. I think it's a lovely, succinct, simple articulation of what we hope Belcarra will be. In some portion of the document, I'd really love to get the word stewardship and legacy in there, but this, for the initial vision statement, works for me.
We did manage to get stewardship into the strategic goals. So that's coming up. Ian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'll just put it down. I just wondered, when you look at the boundaries of Village of Belcarra, all around us is the park. And I just wondered if somehow the parkland, I mean, those are issues that we're always having to coordinate with the park. I thought the first statement, it's nice between the forest and the sea, somehow, I'm not sure, bordered by Metro Park or in conjunction, something nice, just to indicate that that our boundary is basically parkland.
Great, that's great feedback. Thank you. Ralph, you have your hand up.
Thank you. My view is the setting is one of nature, forest, and sea. Now, the regional park, wonderful, you know, it's motherhood and apple pie and all the rest of it, but that's an administrative aspect of, you know, of the forest and sea that's around us. So I have nothing against regional parks, but I think the fundamentals are that of nature and the environment we have, with the focus on forest and sea.
Okay, thank you for sharing that perspective, Ralph. Are there any other comments or thoughts about the draft vision statement? Yes, Angela.
I don't know if what you like any other of you feel about the dropping of the semi-rural village, semi-rural. I like the word.
You would like to include the term semi-rural in the vision?
Yeah, that's the word I like most.
Okay. This is all very good feedback. Okay, well, again, as I mentioned, we'll present this at the community open house as well and get a bit more feedback from residents and continue to tweak and modify depending on what we hear from the community. So building off of the vision statement, we also cobbled together 7 strategic goals. So again, these strategic goals are going to be sort of the overarching umbrella that will guide the plan. So based on what we heard from you in the community, we've identified the following 7 strategic goals. 1, to be a steward of the natural environment. We made this our first goal because it was unequivocally the most common theme that was shared with us through engagement. 2nd, to be an advocate for climate change and emergency preparedness. 3, to be a safe place for residents and visitors to explore. 4, to be a village that offers a range of housing options. 5, to be a municipality that evolves progressively and sustainably. We heard from a lot of people that they were supportive of growth, provided it occurred sort of incrementally and you know, at a slower pace. 6, to be a community where residents feel engaged, informed, and heard. We did hear through a number of feedback that there are residents feel that decisions are being made without adequate public consultation, that they don't feel informed about some of the things that are happening at Village Hall. And so what we're seeing as a general trend in OCPs right now is that communication and engagement piece is making their way into the OCP documents. And we felt, particularly given how much we heard from the community on this topic, that it made sense to include this as a strategic goal. And 7, to be a connected neighbor with strong intergovernmental relationships. And this is another one that Andrew and I are observing as we are chatting with the various stakeholders, that, Belcarra, part of it may be on account of its size, isn't as vocal or as engaged as some of the larger municipalities. And I think that's probably a factor of it's just quite a bit smaller, right? You don't have a number of the issues that, say, Surrey or Langley may have, but we want to ensure that because we've had so many really good conversations with administration and the stakeholders over the last 2 months, that we continue to build that momentum, and that we look for ways, particularly through policy in the OCP, to strengthen those relationships. Ralph, I see your hand is up. You can be the first one to comment on the goals.
Thank you. I support all 7 of what's been laid out, but nitpicky wordsmithing here. Number 2, I don't think we advocate for climate change. We advocate for mitigating climate change. Very subtle difference there, but so what I suggest that wording be, to be an advocate for emergency preparedness and mitigation of climate change. Okay. Or some other word, but we're reacting to climate change. We're not advocating climate change.
Yeah, I think the intent was that you're advocating for climate change preparedness, but I can see that it wasn't as clear, so we need to work on the wording there.
I mean, other than that, I totally agree with what you laid
out. Marianne, your hand is up.
Right, I was going to chime in on item number 2 as well. I agree with what Ralph said. I would, like to see the language, possibly separate the climate change goal from the emergency preparedness goal. They're both vital. In terms of climate change, I think it's important to try to take a step beyond advocating into actual, doing things, action. How you want to phrase that, I don't know, but I think advocating for climate change mitigation to me says it's good to advocate, but if it could be, I would vote for it to be a little bit stronger than that, and a separate goal of its own, because it's so important.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. Thank you, Marianne. Is there anything that we have missed that you feel should be identified as a strategic goal? Or anything on the list that you find surprising? Okay, we'll take it away. Oh, Angela, I see your hand is up, sorry.
I have a question about the range of housing options. How do we compare with other bigger cities, and what options we have to offer? I don't think we have a lot of a range of options to offer. Speaking about the smaller size of the city, I think we are quite limited in the range of housing options.
Yeah, and I think that was one thing that we heard from the community, is that right now there is a limited range of options available, something that people would like to see. We heard that from young families. We heard that from people that have lived in the community for several decades, looking to possibly downsize, looking for ways to stay in the community as they age. So I think that is something that a lot of people are looking for ways, a policy framework that would enable more housing options to be created over the next 20 years. Ralph, your hand is up.
Thank you. On the question of range of housing options, Belcarra already is pretty progressive in terms of offering the opportunities for accessory suites, coach houses, and much more so than neighboring municipalities. But we also have to keep in mind we're a rural community that's outside the urban containment boundary. So while we certainly have been in recent years offering opportunities, by the nature of the fact that we're rural, things like apartment blocks just aren't on the table.
I think sometimes we focus a lot on subdivision and the creation of smaller lots, and we don't think a bit more creatively in terms of what could be developed if we were to consolidate lots as well, right? So I think that there are a number of opportunities that have yet to be explored in the community. Maybe looking at smaller lot sizes isn't the only opportunity out there.
Interesting. Okay.
Ian, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just, whoops, I've lost myself here. I'd like to just carry on with your, Melissa's said exactly what I was thinking, and only you probably said it much better than I will say regarding the range of housing options. And one of the things that I would like to have us explore is there is a report put out by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding sewage and subdivision best practice guidelines. And rather than design or suggest how these different housing options might be developed, I think that within the scope of the OCP, we need to indicate, according to this particular report, that the option or the fact that these sewage treatment systems that would need to be implemented, just the OCP needs to just recognize that. Not that we're going to design or implement, but like you indicated, Melissa, there's multiple lots around the village that might be developed into something yet to be determined. And so I think that the OCP should recognize that this technology exists and that we may see that kind of development being proposed, and have our zoning and other bylaws handle but for it to proceed, it has to be in the OCP according to this draft guidelines. So we need to put something in to indicate current
I think
practice.
that's a good point. Like the last OCP had language about the water system that's been put in since that time. So, indicating that there's potential for future servicing upgrades, I think makes sense. The exact shape that takes, this is a vision to 2040. Who knows what will come on the horizon between now and then? But yeah, important to be ready for it.
Right.
Flexible.
Good.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Ian. Marianne, your hand is up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I see Ian's point. And I would just say that, saying something about, the need for advanced treatment plants in the event of housing that is denser than, you know, whatever half-acre lots, would be something that would go into a section, an implementation section of the OCP, and just recognize that if there's a consensus in the community that we want, and we already, as Ralph said, we do offer, you know, coach houses and secondary suites. With the coach houses, I don't know how many of them are actually occupied, and if so, by permanent residents versus renters. I'm not sure we have any of that information at hand. But in any case, my 2 cents are that just saying that we offer a range of housing options here, and then getting into the details, you know, in the more implementation part of the document would work.
Thank you, Marianne. Yes, Ralph.
Just a point of information. It's my understanding that something on the order of 25% of all the properties have either accessory suites or coach houses. Now, I would defer to more recent statistics that others might have, but it also says to me, there's lots of room there to move that from 25% to 50%. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any other comments or questions on the draft strategic goals? Okay then. So just moving on. So just a little bit, to give you an idea of what's happening behind the scenes between now and our next meeting. Andrew and I have been working with our GIS colleagues to update and create some new maps that will be included in the OCP. So we'll be able to share those with you at our June meeting. We have also drafted the introductory chapters to the plan. So these are the chapters up front that talk about you know, the legislative authority for creating the OCP. They provide some context on the community. All of that sort of upfront material has already been drafted. We do have placeholders in for Tsleil-Waututh input, and as I mentioned, we'll be communicating with them in the coming weeks, so we will slot their input into the plan. A lot of what we're going to be doing in the next couple of weeks is actually drafting the policies. So, and what we're going to be doing is we've identified 8 key policy areas that we'll be working with. So just to give you an idea of what the framework of the plan is going to look like, these 8 policy areas include natural environment, parks and recreation, hazard lands, climate change, mobility, municipal infrastructure, land use designations, and implementation. So the section on land use designations, that's where we go in and we look at the various designations on those maps. So whether it be residential, whether it be park, as we mentioned, we're looking at the possibility of including a commercial land use designation in the plan, and that all kind of fits into that area. Where you're going to see a lot of policies related to communication and engagement, transparent decision making, that will come in the implementation section, right? So there'll be policies that speak to decision making with regard to land use applications and land use matters. So I think that's one important distinction that I want to make, is that through the engagement process, we heard a lot about communication and decision making more holistically across the community. And at council, we have to remember that this is an OCP that relates to land use. And so these policies will be specific to decision making with regard to land use applications or land use matters. So looking forward, we are starting to design our next round of engagement. So what you're going to see on Friday, when you go to pick up your mail or you're stopping by the bus shelter, and I realize these are really small, they're going to be posted on the website. You can have a closer look, but the next round of posters are going to be placed on Friday. They are going to give a little bit of information about how many community surveys we received, how many people attended the first open house. We posted the draft vision statement, strategic goals. I'm sure we'll probably hear a lot more feedback about number 2, climate change, from others. But we also are going to be advertising our next couple of engagement opportunities. So in consultation with village administration, we decided that it would be most appropriate to have a virtual community open house as opposed to an in-person open house. I know as much as we would all love to gather in person and work a bit more hands-on with the materials, it's just not going to happen at this point in time. So we've identified May 25th for a virtual open house. It will run from 6 until 7:30. We have a Zoom link that will be posted on the OCP review webpage in advance of the meeting. We're not going to be asking participants to register in advance. We have a pretty good idea of how many people are going to show up based on the last one. We are also going to be posting the following day on the open house, on the website, feedback forms. So all the materials that we present at the open house will be available for viewing, as well as specific feedback forms that speak to each of the different policy areas so that people can take the materials, look at them at leisure at home, digest them a bit, and then send us comments on the policies that they've read. And again, we'll go through a very similar exercise as we did with the first open house. We'll take all that information we receive, we'll review it, we will theme it, we'll analyze it, and then we will report back to yourselves and to the village. So I guess our ask to you is, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, encourage people to come out to the next open house. We had a great turnout last time. I expect that we will have a really good turnout again. And just another opportunity for people to share their thoughts on how they'd like to see Belcarra, evolve over the next 20 years. Are there any questions or comments? Marianne, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I just have to say I'm disappointed that we couldn't find a way to have an in-person meeting, not at the village hall. Due to COVID, it's a very small facility. There are 2 picnic shelters at the park. If everybody looks out their windows, it's still daylight in the evening. I just read a study recently in a scientific journal that talked about how creativity is just not, you don't get as much creativity happening with virtual meetings. And I was one of, I don't know how many other people on this group, but I attended the first meeting and I found it awkward and kind of stilted, and I didn't feel like people felt, maybe not everybody's accustomed to being in a Zoom session, and it just wasn't that great. So I don't quite understand why it's impossible. And then the other thing is, with the last community meeting, we did talk about getting flyers out to people or something, because not everybody even, looks at the bus stop posters. So I don't know, maybe people will get the word. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. So.
Dennis, do you have any comments on the village's thoughts on in-person open houses? Is there anything that you'd like to share with the group?
Sorry for the delay there. I was just trying to unmute myself. Excuse me. Well, as most of you around the table tonight know, that currently the village council is still meeting virtually, and village office is not open to the public. It's open only by appointment, or we'll meet them at the door. But so it's, you know, at this point in time, we just felt that, you know, we're in a virtual world, and people are becoming more accustomed to virtual meetings. And given the situation where our facilities are still not open to the public, it was just the consensus that this further public meeting should be virtual. I did hear the comment from Mariana, thank you for that, suggesting that maybe an open air venue, like a shelter, might work. I really don't have any comments on that. I guess partly, and you know, we've had kind of an unseasonably cool April, so I don't know what May 25th that evening was going to be like. But you know, if it was a nice warm evening, that was one thing, but we can't be sure of that either. So we're kind of at the behest of the weather there. But I don't know if I can offer any more comments than that. It's just that on balance, it was just considered that, you know, maybe virtual still would be the best format for the next meeting.
Larry, and then Ralph, I see your hands are up.
Yeah, thank you. I think you know this already because it's been included in an email, but one of the things that I found with the, when I was on the previous OCP committee, one of the things that was very valuable to me at the open house was actually being there in person and seeing and listening to what people were saying, talking to them, and getting a real good firsthand understanding of how people felt. That was really valuable. And we're just not getting that now. So for me, that's something I would really appreciate the opportunity to have. And it just doesn't fit within the current framework.
Yeah, and I appreciate the email that you sent about the breakout rooms not being recorded. That was done intentionally to protect the privacy of the individuals that were in those rooms. We have found that people are very reluctant to share in that format if they know that they're being recorded. And so it is intended to protect the privacy of the participants.
But if the people are in a public meeting, they don't have that privacy. And people commenting on a council meeting that's by Zoom, that's public. When they say it, it's public in the video. So my expectation, honestly, I thought for sure that the public open house, Zoom, would be covered on Zoom. And that was just an assumption that I had made. So anyway, I just wanted to share that information. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but that's just a couple of comments.
Thank you. Ralph, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I think there's a few key points we have to keep in mind. First, the village will be fully notified in terms of the open house availability. And, you know, the things that weren't available and weren't pursued 10 years ago, such as email, fan outs, are now available. So no question, the information will be distributed to the community, not only by email, but through notices at the mailboxes. The second thing is that with public open houses, people often came and arrived without any access to information. They'd get hard copies when they walked in the door, and that point discussion started. With this format, people will have full access to the draft materials well in advance. They can consider it and will be in a far better position to bring forward their comments at the Zoom public information meeting. And my last point is, I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is attendance at council meetings, for example, has actually increased by having the meetings on Zoom. More people attend from the comfort of their kitchen table, to attend the meeting, and as opposed to having to drag their butt out and get in a car and drive up to the village hall. So I think there's a lot of pluses to be said for the virtual open house that offset any of the negatives.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Ralph. Larry, your hand is up again. I'm sorry, Larry, we cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. I appreciate what you're saying, Ralph. I guess just a quick comment. I understand your comments on the preparation and the attendance at the council meetings. But again, the council meetings are provided by video, and we're lacking that at the open house.
I don't understand that comment. A public information meeting for the OCP, that video recorded and it's available to the public. I don't understand what you're saying.
Oh, sorry. I think what Larry was referring to is the discussions that were in the breakout rooms. They were not recorded.
That's exactly correct. Thank you.
Okay, fine.
Okay, well, I think you've probably listened to me talk long enough. So it's your turn to present your material. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and he's going to just talk a little bit about the research team presentations.
Hi all. Just wanted to say again, thank you for the great discussion that we had last week or last month. Like the work that everyone put into the research assignments was greatly appreciated and was exactly what we'd hoped for. The look at policies, like from your view as residents, in terms of what fits with your community, what ideas you like, that really helps us build that policy that we're working on right now. So, just take to heart that these research projects are extremely valuable as we create the OCP, and the thoughts and work and effort that you're putting into them, you will see reflected in the draft. Yeah, so again, just to recap, the presentations, every group has a topic, and we're looking at, how is the issue addressed in the current OCP? How do other communities address the issue? What policies from other communities might be applicable to Belcarra? Any final thoughts or recommendations and resources? And so we provided that template. We heard loud and clear, like a Word version, I think worked better. And I think we've already received one back, and it seems to be working. But happy to receive comments on the template if there's any other tweaks we can make for the last one as well. So for this session, our theme was transportation, trails, and tourism. Yeah, so we had three groups, and maybe we can start with the.
Did I just ask, did you get 3 reports from us? You said 1. There should be 3.
I saw one today. I mean, we were originally we'd asked to receive them after the presentation. So I mean, we can still arrange for that delivery. It's it's all right. I mean,
I understood they were sent last week. You should have 3 on your desk. something's not working. This happened the same time, last time, where the groups got their material together and submitted.
Right. I mean, the purpose of the format that we're doing, I mean, we'll double check, make sure that we've received them all. But we're not reviewing any of the assignments ahead of the presentations. We're really hoping to hear from the groups that put the effort in, or you all put the effort in, but we're hoping to hear from all of the committee before reading the presentation. So, you know, they're hoping the presentations and the discussion that we have today, that really highlights for us, and we're taking notes. That's why Jack's here, to highlight what the important themes are before we dive into those assignments. Ralph, I see your hands up.
Just a small point of clarification. One of the 3 reports wasn't available or sent out until yesterday. So Ian's referring to 2 reports last week, but I take what you're saying.
Okay. So yeah, I saw the one from yesterday. I probably have the others in my mailbox as well. Somebody from the Active Transportation and Trails group, who would like to volunteer to present what you found?
I will do that. Angela in.
Great.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Our group first of all, our group members are me, Larry Carson, Paul DeGraff, and Tracy McCree. The topic our group studied is active transportation and trails, including walking, cycling, and recreation. We reached out to our chair and vice chair recently and obtained their guidance and got some information from them in addition to our own research. The map you see on the screen is provided by Paul. He gave us the link to this wonderful link. It's called All Trails. So, and Ian wants us to show this to all of you. So in this map, you can see the trail system. Actually, this is for all, I don't know how, the range. When I review the map, it shows all Canada. You can review all the trails. So I would like to point out the black dots are the trails. So if you can see my arrow there. So, and here, this is our village area. And the yellow line is the main road. And the white lines are the village roads shared by the vehicles and people, pedestrians. And all this black dots are trails. Some of the available trails are not shown on this map. So this is the base we want to discuss. So we were provided by the template, the definition of active transportation. So active transportation refers to human-powered transportation that includes walking, cycling, jogging, and the use of mobility devices such as wheelchairs, walkers, and strollers. And this our template also lists many benefits associated with active transportation. Common sense, right? So it also says it is important for active transportation infrastructure such as sidewalks, trails, bicycle lanes, and to be safe and comfortable, so that people of all ages and abilities can access these benefits. Equally important is to ensure there are connections within the community to support these activities. I also found a government link. There's a whole section under Canada.ca. The topic is active transportation. So I put the link here. You can get more detailed information from this page as well. And the map link is also provided. It's called All Trails. And in the resource section, we put 3 links: Amur OCP, Village of Amur Park, Parks Master Plan, Salt Spring Island OCP. There's also a Squamish OCP we studied. I forgot to put the link here. So. We are, sorry. Here, definition of the active transportation. So how is the issue currently addressed in the Belcarra OCP? The concept of active transportation, I think, is pretty new. It is not mentioned directly in our current OCP. It was not covered or mentioned by other OCPs as well, other OCPs we studied. But the elements of it are included in various sections of our current OCP. So mainly in the vision section and the strategy section, but they were discussed very briefly in a very top level. So under the environment, it says we will build no road except to provide new access road to access Belcarra North. And this concept is also covered on section 4, greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy. In this section, it says, enhance the trail network within the village in order to encourage pedestrian and cyclist mobility. Also in the vision section, the infrastructure, it says, the circulation of networks should be provided in a safe, efficient, and economic manner. Under section 3, land use, the ideas, some of the elements were covered in park access, water access, but not in detail. I think we are, our topic is also covered partly by the other group, traffic and parking. So there's a separate section for the transportation policies, and section 3.3.1 road network is mainly regarding traffic and parking. We're not going to repeat that section, but point out to the section 3.32 path network. It says pedestrian and bike paths may be constructed on undeveloped right-of-way or on new roads to provide safe access. Right-of-way in the north, I think it's within the Belcarra Regional Park, will only be developed for trails with the mutual agreement of Village and Metro Vancouver. And it also says marine revenue will continue to be joined by footpaths at Yonge Road. I think you can see this on the map I just showed you. Not to repeat the information under water access, and it is worth pointing out that regional under section 3.34 regional greenways network, it says village supports the completion of the regional greenways network where appropriate. Elements are covered under regional context statement, and increasing transportation choice. I found today that we're missing section 6.4 when we studied this current OCP, which is very important. Section 6.4, which is implementation, says form a trail committee of residents to assist the village in enhancing the trail network within the community. These are all that was included in our current OCP. So for how other community addresses the issue in their OCP, I think the next section will also reflect the difference or highlights between our OCP and their OCPs. So I'm not going to repeat the points of other OCPs, but we studied Amur OCP, Squamish OCP, and Salt Spring Island OCPs. Because they're bigger size cities, I think they covered more in details about trails and active transportation. So I will focus on what policies and tactics from other communities might be applicable to Belcarra and why. So Amur and Salt Spring Island OCPs have parks and trails maps as attachments, which we don't have. Amur and Salt Spring Island OCP encourage the connection between local, intermunicipal, and regional trails and amenities. Village of Amur has a separate parks master plan that provides more specific guidance as to the location, type, and design of parks, trails, and protected areas. We focus on trails. It provides an inventory of parklet and trails, and it overviews best practices, hierarchy, gap analysis, implementation plan, etc. This plan is referenced in their OCP, but it is separate from their OCP. We say that this plan is detailed and extensive. Nothing of this scale is being suggested for Belcarra, but it brought to our mind the concept of a basic Belcarra Trails Path Plan that is discussed in the recommendation section. Salt Spring Island has a transportation commission that could provide and promote programs such as public transit, bicycling, walking, ride sharing, car sharing, and parking management strategies as means of reducing reliance on private vehicles. Our OCP did mention that we form a trail committee, but it's only to form a trail committee. No details were discussed in our current OCP. Squamish OCP focuses heavily on safety and recommended staging areas to accommodate that purpose. Salt Spring Island OCP stresses to preserve the scenic rural character of existing island roads and reduce the impacts of new and upgraded roads on the natural environment, resource lands and on the island's character, reduce public cost of road network maintenance. These are what we found we lack in what they have. So final thoughts and recommendations. We want to show you the wonderful photo taken by Tracy on our one of our beautiful trails. And this is her dog and cat working together. So our recommendations and thoughts is that it is suggested that the village of Belcarra consider developing a Belcarra Trails Path Plan. This plan would be outside of the OCP, but would be referenced in the OCP, and the OCP be committed to using the plan. The Belcarra Trails and Path Plan should include the following information: info on existing trails, locations, conditions, and safety issues, as well as identifying any new trails paths that are desired. Also identify any work needed on existing trails and paths, etc. A decision-making process should be developed to help with deciding, prioritizing how and where any money would be spent on trails. User safety should be a component that is always considered. Also, fire safety recommendations for trails should be included. The Belcarra Trails Path Plan could provide much of the information associated with trails paths in one plan. The plan could start small and be developed or upgraded on an ongoing basis using existing resources. Consideration could also be given to forming a group or committee of residents who could be involved both in developing the plan and making recommendations associated with trails plan paths in Belcarra. This OCP should cover the existing trails paths, including trail access to the beach. And I think these access are not known to everybody. And speak to regular maintenance to ensure safety, and they are clearly marked at their entrances and have signage indicating if they are suitable for cycling. The OCP should include maps of existing trails. Encourage residents and visitors to use environmentally friendly ways when traveling within the village of Belcarra. Explore options to improve pedestrian safety on Bedwell Bay Road. Squamish uses staging areas at each end of trails, bicycle lanes, and sidewalks for safety. This should be considered when possible, particularly on new trails and bike lanes. The upgrading and improvement of existing trails should ensure safety and consider accessibility. Respect the natural environment and support existing values as a quiet, beautiful, and semi-rural village. Consider designating heritage trails. The village should be transparent with consultation process in developing new trails, paths, or upgrading existing trails and paths. And the last section is the resource. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you. Melissa, should I ask questions, or you?
If the group has any questions, or do you have a question for me?
I see hands are raised.
There are, yes. Ralph, I believe your hand was up first.
Thank you. Angela, in your overview, your group pointed out that other OCPs had included trail maps with their OCP, which I think is a great idea. Is your group proposing that the Belcarra OCP also include maps?
Yes, we're proposing this, or
Thank
a
you.
separate plan that will include the maps.
Well, my view is that there's the high level overview of what we have and what we're proposing, and then the more detailed plan is in addition to. So I see both scenarios.
Yes.
Just so everybody knows, we already have a trail plan, a trail map. That reflects a lot of the trails that are on this map in the works. So that will be included. I think Sandra's hand was up next.
Can you hear me? Just a couple of questions. Trail right now from Main down to Marine Avenue. It's fairly heavily used. It has a sign on it saying it's not maintained. I'm assuming that's going to be changing. That was put up a couple of years ago. And the other question, it's the first question. So I don't know if Angela's group can address that. That's the first.
Larry or who?
It's just I don't know why the sign was put up. I mean, maybe it was a money saving thing, but it's the sign's still up there. It looks like in the OCP we are going to maintain our trails. So that's the first thing. The second question was, I'm not really clear on the regional greenway network and how does that connect with our existing trail system? So I'm a little bit fuzzy on that. So those are the two questions.
Yes, I didn't do research about the greenway system. It's out of our administration authority. I think Ralph knows more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like me to respond to that? There's an extensive intermunicipal greenway plan that the regional district has been developing. There is no direct connection to Belcarra at this point in time, but I think there's discussions regarding it interconnecting to Belcarra Regional Park. So it's a question of us Belcarra being attuned to the concept and open to the opportunity of connecting. That includes their greenway plan includes bicycle corridors and whatnot. And I think there's active discussions on that area.
Thank you.
So maybe just before we take any more questions, we've had a couple of people recently enter the meeting, and I'm just going to call upon Ian Devlin as the chair just to review the rules for participating in tonight's session.
Yeah, if I could just, I noticed that we've had 3 people now come onto this meeting with their hands up, and right now we're only taking comments and discussion from the committee members. Anybody in the village is welcome to listen in to the conversation, but they will not be given an opportunity to ask questions at this point. So I could ask Ashpur if she'd mind putting down her hand. It's not going to be taken as a question at this time. Thank
I'll
you.
also just say at this point too that we will be hosting other opportunities for members of the community to share in the conversation at an upcoming public open house. So there will be opportunities for you to share your thoughts then. Okay, Marianne, I see that your hand is up.
First of all, I want to compliment the group. I think it was a wonderful, it was excellent research and a wonderful presentation. One thing that could be mentioned or added is that the bulk of the trail network, when you look at it, is actually within Belcarra Regional Park. And so it's not a responsibility of the village to maintain those trails or enhance those trails, but the village can certainly advocate for enhanced safety, accessibility, and safety and whatnot. But there's and of course, there are a few, there are some limited, I would say, options for additional trails within the actual boundaries of the village as opposed to the park. And, there could be some mention that those could be explored in the future, but that might be one of the things road ends are for. But just to mention that the majority of the trail network is within the purview of the Metro Vancouver parks.
Good point, Marianne. Yeah, the trail network within the city or the village's jurisdiction, anyway. If it were to be further explored, would be mostly about connecting to that trail network, realistically. Ralph?
Thank you, Andrew. Just a small point. The trail shown on this map isn't complete in that it does not show the Taylor Road trail between Main Avenue and the bus shelter on Bedwell Bay Road. So that's one item. Yes, right there, somewhere there. And along with that, did the group discussing trails propose any new additions?
Larry, can you comment on that?
Yes, Angela,
Yes.
please.
Yes, hi, we did discuss, but we didn't feel that we were in a position to make specific recommendations. So we tried to cover that in a general sense without getting into specifics. Myself, personally, I'm not that familiar with the trail network in Belcarra, but we weren't comfortable having a sense of what was involved and what it would cost. So we tried to cover it generally without going into specifics.
Part of what we're talking about here is enhancing pedestrian connections. And so the examination of other potential links within the residential area that ties the whole system together, I think is very important.
I would agree. Our committee would agree with that.
Yeah, so at an OCP level, it's great to have like the policy direction, and intention to explore and things on maintenance and everything. One of the key recommendations that can be put from an active transportation and trails standpoint is the recommendation that a more specific plan be explored in future, which Angela and folks have pointed to. And that's where you would get into more specifics. I think a key thing to point out with the map that's shown and with a lot of publicly available mapping, because there's lots of apps and things that are available. They, as Ralph mentioned, they don't necessarily show all trails, but sometimes they show trails that aren't necessarily legally there. So there's some trails that just exist and have existed, but they're not maintained by any sort of municipality or any government or anything. They just have kind of always been there. And so what the opportunity that a trail specific or an active transportation specific plan gives you is the opportunity to find out which trails should be there, which trails might need to be decommissioned, what trails, if they're needed, how to maintain those and who's responsible for them. Because there's just whittling out things that, because trails are interesting in terms of, they meander across the landscape, and sometimes they can go through from a municipal land back into a park, over private land, and who decided that, I don't know. But a trail plan allows you to sort out where those potential problems might be and get to the root of them. Just in the interest of time, I think we should move on to the next group. But this is a great discussion, and thank you very much, Angela and company, for the great presentation. I muted myself. Next, we have the tourism promotion and management team. Somebody like to tell us what you found?
Myself. Yeah, I want to share the screen, so I'll go up there and okay, here we are. Share one sec. Okay, anybody see it? Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All righty. Okay, with the we looked at tourism, our group, and I think we are a little bit torn with this topic, as we looked at the OCP. How is this issue currently addressed in our current OCP? And there doesn't appear to be any direct reference to tourist promotion and management in the current OCP. So what we then did was take a look at, you see this? We looked at a few other communities. Now, take in mind that these are bigger communities than ours, and they have more infrastructure in place. So we looked at Ashcroft and how they encourage development of tourism. And their key was working with key partners such as the nearby Indigenous communities and other stakeholders to develop an integrated tourism strategy that leverages Ashcroft's agriculture, history, Indigenous and non-Indigenous scenery, and the arts and culture community. They also looked at, which we have now in place, enabling permanent residents of residential dwellings to operate short-term rental accommodations. And also in Ashcroft, they looked at accommodations, was it a downtown beautification and streetscaping? And then, rather than reading the rest of this for Ashcroft, we looked at Anmore, which is more a smaller village, and they support home-based businesses, which we don't, and bed and breakfast operations, which are regulated through the zoning bylaw. Owen Island, as we know, has a fair amount of tourism. But what they focus on is their position as the island is to present the island as a destination for ecotourism, educational tourism, retreats, and health and wellness centers. And they want to support commercial facilities without distracting. Wait a second. First, commercial facilities are supported that enhance visitors' enjoyment of the island's natural amenities without distracting from them. Now, we look at communities with similar populations. Clinton, which is a population of 641, local economic resilience encourage economic development as a key prosperity for the entire community through designation of land for employment, supporting diversification, supporting practices to maintain the integrity of resource lands used for tourism, encouraging diversification, supporting existing businesses, and fostering a support business climate for new and existing businesses. Now, we don't have businesses in the village, like we don't have a store in the village, so we're a little bit different than these. Now, the other community, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, was Port Alice. Port Alice is a small community, but they want the economy broadened to give a higher degree of stability to the community and an increased emphasis on tourism. We're thinking of it could serve as a tourist center for sports fishing, boating, and kayakers. It's a gateway to the West Coast. Now, the village wishes Port Alice to work with community businesses. As I said, we don't have any potential new business owners, and the Economic Development Office to develop more accommodation and services to increase tourism activity. Now, what policies and tactics from other communities might be applicable to Belcarra and why? So we said in our group, it's premature to deal with the topic of tourism prior to completing the land use recommendation as tourism as a source of economic development. At this time, the village of Belcarra does not have any commercial zoning that would allow for any business that would encourage tourist activities. That could change over term of this OSP. Okay, now, we talked about park facilities attract visitors on a daily basis to enjoy nature, hiking trails, and wildlife viewing. Now, the village, as I mentioned before, has just passed a bylaw allowing for residents, to operate as short-term rentals. Like the village of Lions Bay, issue temporary use permits for all operations and register and inspect all secondary suites. Plan and execute a secondary suite registration campaign. Now, we talked a little bit about Bedwell Bay being a tourist destination for boaters. It's a water access only for boaters wanting to spend the weekends on the water. Now, in the summer, I think you get over, almost 100 boats in the bay. Right now, they monitor themselves, and I guess managing how the bay is used is the main issue for Belcarra residents. No dumping of sewage, as in the past few years, as there has been an E. coli, no swimming advisory in the bay. And also, one other thing is noise has been an issue. That's another topic. Village of Belcarra is also a destination for cyclists and hikers who want to explore nature and enjoy outdoor activities. Again, most of the trails lie within Metro Vancouver and the Belcarra Regional Park. Now let's go back on. Final thoughts and recommendations. Residents of Belcarra want visitors to enjoy our village, but without the problems of vehicles, parking, and the risk of forest fires. Translate in setting up buses to make the journey simple and not creating traffic bottlenecks. Continue to support traffic being routed to the park. It says, with this in mind, determining the category as tourism most suitable for Belcarra, it would seem that sustainable tourism would make sense. Now, industry consensus agrees ecotourism is more focused on ecological conservation and educating travelers, whereas sustainable tourism focuses on travel that has minimal impact on the environment and local communities. The park is responsible for dealing with traffic and people wanting to enjoy the lake, hiking trails, and the park facilities. See below. So we looked at how we could support parks and the First Nations. And we looked at perhaps expanding kayaking and canoeing opportunities in Belcarra Park. North Vancouver First Nations have guided tours along the bay, but remember, there's no economic benefit to Belcarra. We can continue and expand Belcarra's Beach Keepers program, which is pretty popular in the park. It's volunteers that promote stewardship of the marine system. We could expand the uptake on short-term rentals, which can result in a revenue source if managed correctly. Providing a set of guidelines and policy directions. Okay, it seems premature to deal with the topic of tourism prior to completing the land use recommendations as tourism as a source of economic development. Belcarra could benefit from exploring options to support and promote tourism. Options could range from development potential on the ELC lands once a road is built. Possibly organized and sponsored events could be an option to expand this area. Creativity will be required to expand, but if managed appropriately, would be a welcome addition to our village. We also talked one more thing. In years gone by, a ferry taxi service was operated and served the area. Would be a great option if that was viable, instead of cars and buses. Again, there's little or likely no financial benefit to Belcarra. Now, we listed some of our resource places: Ashcroft, Enmore, Village of Lions Bay, and Port Ellis. Now, below, a couple of pictures. This was, I cannot pronounce it, rowers and tour groups past Cozy Cove in Belcarra. This is quite popular as a tourism, but it doesn't give Belcarra any tourism money from this. So basically, that's what we came up with. If there's any question. Ian, do you have any to add?
Oh, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Did very well. With a tough
Yeah,
topic.
thanks. It's definitely a good topic. I just wanted to jump in. I think you guys did a great job, and I one of the things I like about this topic is it's tricky, especially in Belcarra, because there's no commercial, it's very limited in terms of economic benefit back to Belcarra, but the volume of park visitors is such that the management of tourism becomes important for the village and has a real impact on residents. The tourism question is one that is very interesting and will be, discussed in the next topic, but it's one that really connects all three of these things that we're talking about today. So like, people are coming for trails to go hiking, but they're parking all over the place and causing problems. That's a tourism kind of management related issue. And so there's an opportunity in the OCP to kind of, address that. A key suggestion might be is just reinforcing the need to talk to Metro Vancouver and TransLink about managing how transport works in and out of the village, and to make sure that the impacts of those visitors is not too onerous on residents. The other thing that we've heard and are still kind of formulating is this idea of a commercial designation. Right now, there's no land designated for commercial use, but the types of commercial that might be of interest would also, future potential businesses would also benefit from that tourist traffic. So it's not a direct impact, but like it's all connected. that commercial can look like anything. There's aspects of the Sassmat Outdoor Center that could be considered commercial. There's a concession down at the park. There's the kayak rental. There's the potential to have like a food truck or something. So like these are all, potential ideas. Ralph?
Thank you, Andrew. Just an observation. 10 years ago, OCPs talked about commercial activities like bed and breakfast. Fast forward a decade and the change in technology, now all of that is morphed into short-term rentals, often referred to as Airbnb. So Belcarra has a pretty comprehensive short-term rental bylaw that deals with that. And the term bed and breakfast, while I think we all relate to it and we understand what it is, for all intents and purposes, it's short-term rentals. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments on the topic of tourism, potential benefits, and or just management? Marianne?
Excuse me. I noticed in the document that it said that until the land use is sorted out, really commercial tourism can't be addressed. I don't even know, Ralph, if somebody could have an official bed and breakfast, but maybe Airbnb, like you say, Airbnb and bed and breakfast would be the same thing. But if somebody does engage in that kind of activity, would there be any even small tax benefit to the village coffers? I don't know. The other thing that our group thought about that, relates to tourism a little bit is if it's the Tsleil-Waututh First Nation that does the kayak rentals and the tours. And if they were interested in expanding to maybe rent electric bikes, things like that, if they, wanted to put in a coffee bar with, whatever, our group kind of expressed support for that idea.
If I could respond, a bed and breakfast is it's all shades of gray to short-term rentals. Bed and breakfast often implies multiple rooms for let, and which brings with it, same as short-term rentals, the issues of parking and noise and disturbance to the community. So, it's really a case-by-case basis. We have in the past in Belcarra had a bed and breakfast, and it went by the way, and but now within the framework of short-term rentals, I think someone could come forward with a plan. But again, it's a case-by-case basis. How many rooms? What's the parking availability and all that goes with that? So it's easier said than done. It's real easy to say, let's have short-term rentals. What's really hard is to manage all the issues.
Yeah, the short-term rentals are like Belcarra has a policy, but they're also the zoning bylaw is a good tool for providing more specifics on how that can happen. I'm going to call on Carolina to speak, and then just wanted to ask if everybody's okay staying a couple extra minutes just to give the last group some time to present, and then we can move on to them. Okay, Carolina.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Just a reminder, at the park, there is a food stand there. And on our policy for short-term rentals, I'm positive it covers Airbnb and bed and breakfast as well. Airbnb would be short-term rentals. So yeah, just a point. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So we have traffic and parking. So both the topics we just talked about will have traffic and parking impacts. So that's why this has all been included. So would somebody from traffic and parking like to speak?
Well, I didn't volunteer. I was drafted to do this. I voted for somebody else. I'm not going to share my screen because I've never done that. And anyway, time is short and you can all read it afterwards. Basically, what we found was that in our current OCP, transportation and traffic are addressed in sections of, in various subsections of section 3, in 4.2.2, 5.5, and 6.3. And essentially, the current OCP states, as we've already heard, that no new roads, excuse me, will be built in Belcarro with the exception of the possible future proposed road joining Belcarro to Farrer Cove South. And we state that improving transit ridership, carpooling, ride sharing, and car sharing co-op programs are supported, that access by water to properties that are where there's no road access is supported, and that we support the regional greenways network where appropriate and translate service to the community. And there are no references to parking in the current OCP. So we went ahead and reviewed OCPs from Anmore, Lions Bay, Bowen Island, and Salt Spring Island. And I won't go into the details of that, but all of them provided some ideas for inclusion in our OCP. And the underlying themes of the recommendations that either were drawn from the review of the other OCPs or from our own discussions, there were essentially what I would say 5 themes. One was improving safety for all road users. Second was recognizing that the roads are community assets, also for all road users, drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. Third is encouraging a variety of transportation choices for village residents and especially park visitors to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and support active lifestyles. And our 4th theme is supporting efforts to reduce park traffic, private vehicle traffic. And then 5 is to support the community consensus on parking in the village, because council has just undertaken a survey on the subject of parking. So I'll just give you a few of the highlights in terms of specific recommendations. We want to continue to ensure that Belcarro's roads are safe and equally inviting for bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. And there's some work to do there to connect the village and make the community safer. And where possible over time to incrementally widen paved roadways as part of infrastructure renewal. And another one is to consider the installation of safer crosswalks and traffic calming measures on Bedwell Bay Road, because of we've all seen and possibly been at one time or another speeders on that road. So we want to improve pedestrian safety. That could include electronic speed limit warning signs, the push button flashing pedestrian crosswalks, and slightly raised pedestrian crosswalks, which would be small, but possibly effective speed bumps. And the flashing signs in one particular place that would kind of just past the village hall, what some of us call the Belcarro Freeway part, that would remind us of what the speed limit actually is there. We propose or recommend installing 2 new bus shelters. One outbound on Bedwell Bay Road, east of Midden Road, and another one about 5 meters south of the Village Hall driveway access. And to install 2 new pedestrian crosswalks, one immediately south of the Village Hall driveway and one a little north of Watson Road, and that electronic speed warning sign just south of the Ward access driveway. And we support Metro Vancouver Park's planned limited expansion of parking near South Beach and Bowl Beach. But after that, we recommend supporting their efforts to reduce the peak summertime use of and anytime use of private vehicles to the park, to Sassamat and Belcarra. Supporting efforts to improve the dedicated and more frequent shuttle bus transit that is, we've read about in the Tri-City News that they're going to be doing that more. And support for park and ride hubs, priority park access for the transit, and more practical buses or some kind of service, whether it might be a private service, something that would allow for transporting supplies, people, and pets. Because one of the things that causes people to come out in private vehicles is the fact that they bring, you know, shelters and barbecues and crab traps and things. We support the existing restrictions on parking on Bedwell Bay Road, and we would like to encourage Metro Van Parks to reduce or eliminate the peak use of overflow parking on Tum Drive, because it blocks the bike lane and makes it unsafe for cyclists. And it was suggested that, and we recommend that vehicles that display the Sassamat Fire Department or Coquitlam Search and Rescue license plates, that they be allowed to park in resident-only parking areas in recognition of their important work as volunteers in the community. And this is sort of near to my heart. We wanted to suggest that Metro Parks can consider whether it's possible to have some sort of permit system or something to allow a small number of scuba divers to park near the access to the Whiskey Cove diving area, because they used to be there and now they're not. And we'd like to advocate for better and better placed signage for the turnoff to Belcarra Park. It should be earlier and larger and make it clear that Tum is the road to access all areas of the park, the trails and the picnic area. Because if the people who miss that turn, we see them regularly when we go walking, especially on the weekends, is Google Maps then directs them to drive all the way into the village, get to Midden Road right beside the park, turn, make the whole U-turn and drive back to Tum. So we could, you know, better signage might help them get there. And we also support, and this is, you know, totally outside of our ability to implement, but we support additional parkland acquisition for the Tri-Cities subregion, because the pressure on Belcarra Park and, you know, Sassamat Lake and the rest of the park is just enormous in the summer. And improvements to Burke Mountain Provincial Park to make it more maybe attractive to more visitors, because our group's consensus was that there's been such an enormous increase and additional increases. Port Moody is looking to possibly double their population, and you know, and we feel that that insufficient parkland is being set aside for the increases in population. And I just want to close quickly with a good quotation. This is from Bowen Island, and I modified it for Belcarra. Even though our village is a short drive from 3 million urban and suburban residents, it feels like a world apart. Roads are winding and nights are dark. We highly value and want to preserve and enhance a sustainable, small community way of living. That's it.
Great. Thank you. Carolina, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Marianne. That was a great presentation. So just a few points here that I should note. So yeah, so council undertook a survey in the past few weeks. We're going on parking. So we're going to be presenting those results of the survey on the next meeting. So next week on Monday. Burke Mountain, there is a lot of stuff going on there. So they are expanding the park. There's a lot of work going up there. Bus services during the summer. TransLink, they have been upping their bus services during the summer here to us for a few years now. And this year, one thing that's my understanding that it's happening different. There's one big bus coming straight from the Cleveland station directly to White Pine and Belcara Park. So that's going to help too. There's also a study being conducted right now between Port Moody and Parks to see how much traffic we get, right? And to try to find out a solution, especially for emergency vehicles. That is something I was on the Parks boards last year, and that is something that I worked really hard on trying to advocating for Parks to help us control this traffic. And, you know, when we see those huge lineups and buses being held 45 minutes, once with kids getting out of the bus at First Avenue there because they gave up, it was just too hot. And, you know, those little buses, the ACs don't work that well when it's that hot, like it was like 40 degrees at some point last year. So we are, so that is something that I really pushed on Parks, and there is some studies going on now between them and Port Moody. Sassima Volunteer Fire Department. That is also something that I highlighted when we started talking about parking. So right now, the way it works is that anybody that has a plate for the Sassima Fire Department can park on our roads as long as they're legally parked where residents can park. So I just wanted to make those few points too. Thank you. Oh, also one more thing, if I may. There is actually a spot for divers to continue to park here. And some of them have been using continuously. It's actually at Whiskey Cove right now. And I do understand, because I did raise that question. I have a great concern for the divers because they've been coming here for so long and they're so respectful. And we even got to know some of them because you usually get the same people, right, throughout the years. So my understanding, what Lorna told me quite a few months ago when I raised that on a council meeting, is that there has been some permits issued, but we'll probably be talking about that more on Monday's meeting. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Marianne?
Yeah, one other thing, just in terms of parking, and I mean, you know, we recognize that there are quite a few no parking signs from the minute you hit the village all the way through the village, and it does feel somewhat unwelcoming. So we suggested putting up this is small, trivial almost, but putting up a sign that said, you know, visitors who come by transit, you know, bicycle or on foot are welcome, or, you know, transit pedestrians and cyclists welcome.
Yeah, I like that idea. I never thought about that. That's actually a really good idea. Thank you.
All right, any other comments on parking? If there's none, then we can move into assigning next month's groups. So I'll just share my screen again. So next month's topic is going to be complete communities, housing, and waste management. So this will be the last one, and so we've got 3 topics under this. First being complete communities, including potential permissive commercial use. And so complete communities can mean a lot of things. Commercial can be part of that. You know, it's transit is part of that. The active transportation is part of that. How does that all kind of work? Age-friendly can be part of that. Inclusive approach to housing. So we've talked a lot about housing and how that might work going into the future. So this can be affordable housing. You know, how could that possibly work? I don't expect any of you to solve the affordable housing issue in this topic. You know, that's beyond anyone to be expected to solve. Housing for different life stages, also an important one. So, you know, how do different communities tackle that? And then waste management and recycling being the last one. So this is also tied into some of the climate goals that we've talked about in previous sessions. So those are the groups. We'll be emailing out the assignment sheets and the groups as a reminder tomorrow. And so, yeah, that's that. And next steps. Yeah, so we're continuing our dialogue with Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We actually have our first meeting with them tomorrow, and so that will be an evolving conversation. We'll be drafting the policies for the key policy areas that we talked about earlier. Then preparing for the open house on May 25th, which we invite everybody to come and attend and share your thoughts and ideas. The other thing to note about that next meeting is that we will be providing a feedback form that people can fill out. So if they have ideas that they come after the public session or even before, they can write them down, add them into the feedback form, and we'll be looking at those as well. We'll be refining our community vision and strategic goals based on some of the comments that we've already heard, keeping in mind that they may be open to further revisions after we hear from the public. And finally, we'll be completing a draft of the plan to walk through with you at our next session on June 1st. So, and we'll hear our final presentations then. And yeah, we're getting there. So appreciate all of your work and attention and participation in all these meetings. It's really valuable to the whole process. If there's any other questions? Melissa, you have something to add?
Yeah, just one thing is that, so at that next meeting, we will be receiving the last round of presentations, but we also wanted to discuss with you, because we are targeting completing this process so that the plan can be forwarded to council in July, which means that we really only have sort of 2 months to work with here. And so what we're proposing is at our June 1st meeting that we, in addition to the presentations, we walk you through a copy of the draft plan. Then we will provide it to you digitally. And what we'd like to canvass you this evening on is scheduling an additional steering committee meeting that we hadn't originally anticipated having in June, preferably 2 weeks after our regularly scheduled meeting. So that would give you 2 weeks to review the draft, work with Ian as your chair to consolidate any comments that you have. We'd love to receive one document of comments and receive that 2 weeks later and have a meeting with you to discuss that. So then we can, in this latter part of June, put the finishing touches on the plan. So we just want to throw that out there, have a discussion with the group to see whether or not you would be supportive of that approach, or if you have some other ideas. Ian, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I guess on your was it March 2nd committee meeting and the presentation that you provided, you indicated there's 23 topics that were identified through background research that we would be dealing with. We've now, at the end of this, will be, my count, will be 12 topics. So we're halfway there. And I would wonder what topics were missed or weren't included and why. The other thing that I have is that, and I think is very important, if you look at the last public consultation process, out of the comments that you got, 1 in 5 of the residents indicated their dissatisfaction with governance. And I think that we need to look at what comment or what statement can be put into the OCP regarding governance. Now, I asked Dennis and he sent you a warning that I was going to be asking you for this information, and I don't see it coming out. And like you say, we're now running out of time. And I can't emphasize more that you're going to need governance somehow to be a statement or something in the OCP. I can pretty well guarantee at the next public consultation process that governance will come up again. You can't, this village with that frequency of comments going into the public consultation process, I don't think we can leave that out as a discussion issue that needs to be developed somehow in the OCP. Even if it's only a statement regarding the changes since the last OCP that the village has gone in. We now have infrastructure. We've got a water system that we didn't have. We still have roads. We need to maintain them. We have ditches. We need to maintain them. So things like that need to be included in the governance statement somehow. But I'm afraid that it's, with time running out, perhaps these other 11 items that you haven't assigned us to talk about, I don't know if governance was in there or not, but anyway, that's one point. The other question, I don't keep very good notes, and I would ask if this presentation that you gave us could be sent to the committee members again, just for reference on the scope and goals that you laid out.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank
So
you.
we usually following these meetings, we provide Paula with the presentations and she uploads them onto the OCP Review Committee website. So they're available for the public to view there as well, along with the minutes of the meetings. So it will be public. We can, in the interim, circulate it to members first thing tomorrow morning. We can definitely do that. A couple of points that you made. So one, we did identify based on those early conversations that we had 23 different topics. And I think it's important to note that within the time frame that we've been allocated, it would be unrealistic for the committee to address all of those topics. It's not to say that Andrew and I are not diving into those areas. So while they may not have been assigned to you as a research project, we are having discussions with the various audiences and stakeholders on those topics. We're getting input from them. We also had conversations in the breakout rooms with members of the public that also touched on several of the other areas. What we chose to assign to you as your research projects were the topics that resonated a bit more at the time. Now, you're right, Ian, at the public engagement process, we heard a lot of comments about governance. Again, we have to recognize what the scope of the OCP is and recognize that it is a land use focused document. And as I mentioned earlier on this evening, we will address some of those issues in the implementation section. So when it comes to making land use decisions, there will be a policy framework that we will craft that speaks to, public notification, opportunities for public engagement and consultation on applications, committing council to reporting back what they've heard, making minutes of meetings publicly available. So there will be that framework in place, but again, it will be from a land use focus. I think, sometimes I think this goes back to that education piece and why it was so important in that first meeting, public meeting, is, the OCP, while it is a plan for the village, it's not all encompassing, and it's not going to address all of the issues that are prevalent in the community. But what we can do is we can address those that are related to land use, and which I think Andrew and I are fully aware of what some of the concerns are, and we have a very good understanding, and we'll do our best to ensure that there's a framework in place to deal with them.
If I
Andrew, I
may,
don't know if you-
One thing I would just
debate it.
add on the topic of topics, you mentioned there's numbers being thrown around. There's 23 things identified originally, and we're talking about 12 things. The topics that we've designed for everybody to talk about are consolidations of those original ideas. So it's not a one-to-one ratio. So each topic that each group is looking at is talking about several of those 23 topics. So I hope that provides some clarification.
Yeah. Okay, if I may just reply to Melissa's comment, not to debate it, but I have seen in OCPs where they've put just I don't know the term of it, little triangle or stick drawing of how the township or town or village was organized in order to accomplish the goals of the OCP, not with specific name, but that sort of a structure was included in the OCP to indicate this is how the village is structured in order to accommodate or accomplish the goals of the OCP document. So if that fits in as governance, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, Ian. And again, you'll have a look at the draft, and if we haven't addressed those concerns to your satisfaction, then we can definitely have a conversation about it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Melissa and Andrew and Jack, I think somewhere. Yeah, there he is. Does anybody else on the committee have any comments? Everybody getting tired? Ready to go? Okay. Well, thanks. And 9:14, we have adjourn the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody.
everybody.
Thanks so much.
Good meeting.
Bye.
Thank you.